All right. Hello, everybody. So I have a very, very, very opinionated talk to give to you today. What's it all about? So it's about this thing called HTMX that some of you have heard of, some of you are curious about, and some of you have used it before. It's fairly new on the scene in a way. It was actually released in 2020, around September, October 2020, version 1 came out, and it's been making waves in certain communities and not others. What I like about it, and the thing that I'm going to really go into, is that it simplifies web development, and that has a lot of really positive ripple effects. And as opinionated as this talk is, HTMX is not a silver bullet. It doesn't solve all of the web dev problems. It just solves a lot of them. So we'll be getting into that. So hello, my name's Sheena. These are my emojis. So I've been coding for a long time, and I've mostly been coding in places that are weird, and that's kind of what I like. For the last 5 years, I've been working in tech education specifically, and that's where my heart is at. And what I've been doing there is building education systems. So that Umuzi thing that I mentioned earlier, like that's a kind of a coding bootcamp thing that takes noobs and turns them into professionals. And so I put a lot of thought into figuring out what are the minimum skills that a developer needs in order to be a professional. Like what is the shortest distance, minimum viable developer? And things have been getting weird. And they've been getting weird because the entry-level development position has changed. So back in the day, when I was a young dev, web development used to be like a gateway drug into software development, because for lots of reasons, partially because it was easy. Like there was a lot of work to do, but it was also like actually not that hard to do it. And that entry level used to be down here, and things have been getting more and more complicated. And there's a good reason for that. Like the reason is that people want more interactive experiences. Modern web dev has a lot to do with modern like front-end experiences, rich experiences. And so all of these tools have been developed that help make that stuff possible. So we've got React, we've got Vue, we've got Angular, we've got Svelte. There's so many of them. And the front end in web development thinks about life in a specific way, and the back end thinks about life in a very different way. And so things get complicated. So here's what we have if we have like a full stack application. This is aggressively simplified, but you have a front end application and it does its thing. We've got a back end application, it does its thing. And we need to figure out what tools to use to build the stuff. So there's a couple of different options. Generally, again, like this is drastically oversimplified to get to the point, but yeah, you could just build things out with only a front end. This is a thing that people do. So if you just wanted an informational site or like a blog or something like that, you could not have a back end. That's fine. More commonly, you do have a back end, and since many of the front end tools are built in JavaScript or TypeScript, a lot of people would want to build the back end in the same thing, and so Node has become super popular, and that makes sense. Another option is to use something like Next.js, which tries to combine the front end and the back end in one application. And it does that in an interesting way, but it also makes life a little bit confusing, because when you're writing Next code, you're like, where is this code running? Is it on the front end? Is it on the back end? What does this weird message mean? And like I use Next myself, but I find it to be like it is more complicated than I would like it to be. So I use Next myself, but I currently struggle to recommend it to people. And then the last one is to have a front end in your JavaScript, probably, and then a back end in whatever you need. And that makes a lot of sense, because usually you will have some business logic in the back end. So like the face of your application, the front end, of course, it needs to work in a browser and look good and stuff. So JavaScript or TypeScript makes a lot of sense, but often your business logic, you'd want to build it in something else. And so here's a realistic example of something that one might build. So you could have a front end with React. React is great. And then you'd want it to look good. So you'd have some kind of front end component library that decides what the buttons look like and that kind of thing. So there's this thing called Material UI. That's pretty solid. Then you need some kind of state management, because you have information that's represented on the screen, and you want to update the information and then update the screen, and so you'll have something like Redux, and then there's side effects that happen, and so Saga, and this is already like quite a hell of a stack and quite a lot for a person to get their head around. Like junior web development roles have gotten way harder, and then all of this needs to talk to a backend, and that backend, let's say you're using Django, because like I like Django. It's really great. This is the web framework for perfectionists with deadlines, which is me. So let's say you're using that, but then React doesn't play nicely with Django. You need some APIs. So you expose some APIs, and then you need to secure those APIs. And now suddenly to build like even the simplest full stack feature, like click a button there, update some stuff in the database, and then update the screen. Like you need to know all of these tools, or you need people to know all of these tools. So I ran a team that was using all of these tools, and it was a struggle to get people to be productive. Some people were productive, but a lot of people just kind of sank. So it's challenging. So the code is complicated. There's lots of different moving parts. Deploying and testing becomes difficult because you have to test the back end, and you have to test the front end, and you have to test it together, and there's different skills in the different things. So like even if you do use like JavaScript on the back end and JavaScript on the front end, the different applications that are running think about the world in very different ways. So you end up having complicated organizations. So if you have an organization that does full stack web dev, they generally have different people doing different things. So you might have a whole team for front end and a whole team for back end, or they might just be individuals on a team, but they're different people. It's not the same person, and that leads to all sorts of different complexities because now there are handovers. If you want to build out a front end feature, now the backend team needs to be involved and create APIs and secure those APIs, and then I forgot a field, and now you need to go through that process again. And so there's more tools that aim to solve that. So like GraphQL is really lovely. I've enjoyed GraphQL, and it lets the front end people kind of almost make their own APIs and fetch the data that they want when they want it, to the detriment of whoever's looking after the database now. So we layer on these tools to solve these problems. And we layer on project management as well, because we have like a bunch of, like the handovers are necessary. You have, like, if you want to build a single feature, you've got to be like, okay, cool, who all is involved? You know, so it becomes challenging. And there's extra handoffs, of course. And anybody who knows about optimizing an organization or a team in any way should know that handoffs are expensive. You want as few of them as possible, and you want them to go as smoothly and like tightly as possible. So it would be nice to get rid of some of those instead of adding extra. So over the years, web dev has gotten a lot more complicated because we've got a general procedure for solving problems, and that procedure is add more stuff. It's like we have a problem, so we add a solution. So we add and we find a new problem. Then we add a new solution. And it's not just a web dev thing, it's a human thing. We do this all the time. But we could just like maybe do the opposite for a while and see what we can subtract. So what if we were to think about HTML and just try to, like, HTML is old. It's as old as the web, really. Like, that's the core technology. That was like the first web pages. And HTML hasn't really changed since it was invented. And that's a pity. How about we just look at HTML and we say, how could we change it so that, what's the least we can do to it so it can actually do what we need? And the answer is, we don't need to change it all that much at all. So that's what HTMX does. It tweaks HTML just slightly so that it can do what we need it to do. So when I first heard of HTMX, I was deep in the JavaScript fatigue, as I'm sure many people in this room are. I don't know how many developers there are here, but it's a thing. There's just like, there's always a new tool, there's always a new framework, there's always a new promise, and you learn these things, and you're just like, oh, there's new problems. Like, what for? And so it's like, it's not an encouraging space to be in. So I didn't really take it seriously at all until I saw a few demonstrations, and it kind of blew my mind. So what is it? It is a JavaScript library, but it's very, very small. You just include it in your HTML file, and then it's there. And it allows you to create these rich front-end experiences, which is great, by adding just a few simple attributes to HTML. So your HTML works just like the old school HTML. It's just got like a few little extra bits that you can use. And what's really nice about it is that since it's so small and tiny and simple, it works on slow devices, and it works on old devices and slow networks and things like that. So if you're running a React application, it tends to be kind of heavy. It uses up a lot of RAM on people's machines and slows things down. But if your client base maybe has crap machines, then you want to use something that's lightweight. So, but what is it? So I want to keep the code in this talk to a minimum, because I want to focus on like the business and organizational value that I see in these tools. But a little bit of code should help a little bit. It should help in making the stuff clear. So this is the hello world of HTMX. And for the most part, it's perfectly normal HTML. So we have a button, and it says click me, right? And then when we click on the button, then it sends a request to this endpoint. So this basically a URL, and then it gets a response, and the response contains more HTML. What does it do with that response? It looks for a part of the page called parent div, and then it swaps the parent div with the HTML that got returned. So basically what it does is it fetches some HTML from the backend and puts it on the page. And you can think of this as just like selectively re-rendering parts of the page depending on different events. And those events can be user events. It could be a person clicking on a thing. It could be like a thing loaded. So you can plug into any kind of like thing that happens in a web page. And that's pretty cool. So we already said all that. All right, so versus React. So I took a shortcut because I didn't feel like writing the code. I asked ChatGPT to write the code for me, and there it is. So I was like, hey, do this in React. And then it made a terrible mistake, and I was like, okay, do it the React way. And it came up with this, which is sort of right. And it's a lot of code. It's like there's quite a lot going on here, and there are ways to simplify this code, sure, but it's still like quite a lot to reason about. And we've got like, here's our button that says click me, right? And then when you click it, it does this handle click. So it calls it this function. And this function fetches a thing from the back end. And then if it's successful, then it sets this thing over here. And then this thing updates this thing over here. And like, it's fine. It does the trick. But it's a lot to reason about versus just like we click the button, we fetch the HTML, we put it on the page. Like it's like, yeah, so HTMX is just like way, way simpler. And so it's simple, but does that mean that it won't be able to handle what we need it to do? Does it scale? Like one of the arguments against it is like, oh, it doesn't scale. But what does scale mean? So scale means generally like two different things. The first thing is like compute type scale, like is it taking up a lot of resources? And so we can't use it a lot because it will eat everything. Like, no, it's small and it's tiny, so that's not the issue. Can it handle complexity? That's really the issue. Like what can we actually do with this thing? And I want to show you a demonstration that somebody else did. This is like the mother of all HTMX demos. And I'm not going to show you this whole talk. I just want to go through a little bit of what this thing can do. So let me know if you can't hear this.
Yeah, Sheena, there is no sound coming through.
Oh no! I wonder why. It's so weird. Let me see if I can fix it. Because presenting a window usually works. Maybe this one. Let me try this.
When you click on one of them, you get a beautiful animation, you get some stuff that reloads on the bottom of the page.
Was that a yes? Ah, fantastic. Okay, cool. Let me just go back slightly. Sorry about that. I just learned a lesson.
So this is a screen that is quite central in our user experience. At the top, you get a navigation timeline. So it's a series of steps. When you click on one of them, you get a beautiful animation, you get some stuff that reloads on the bottom of the page. I can close that for now. On the right column, you get a text. It can be a huge text, but it's just text. The rendering is very quick. This text is split into articles. The articles can be seen just when opening the table of contents. I can mark an article as favorite. When I close my table of contents, my article has been marked as a favorite here. Is it client-side application state management? No, it isn't. It's HTMX. It's just a JavaScript event triggering some very, very located reload. On the left side, you've got a list of items that are related to the text. This list of items can be quite huge. Here we have more than 1,000 items in this list. It's huge, and it works. It doesn't lag. And this list can be filtered, for example, by articles. There are 10 items related to article 2. Easy, HTMX stuff. I can also search something. They all match. No example of search on this one. And let's reset. Now let's dive into one feature that illustrates quite sophisticated application state management that you could think it is, at least. So in this facet filter, I have all my articles with counters of results. And at the top of the filter, I have a special bucket here, which is all the articles I'm interested in. All the articles I marked as favorite. So for now, I have only article 1 and article 2 as favorite. So the counter is 127 results, because it's 117 plus 10. What happens if I'm not interested in article first anymore? Just here, the counter has been updated. Is it some client-side application state management? No. Is there some JavaScript for achieving this? No, 0 line of JavaScript. This is just HTMX all the way. Do you want to see how it works?
Okay, cool. So you can do things that appear to be sophisticated state management, but it is just like re-rendering parts of the page at different times, which is cool and easy to reason about. So you don't need to write complicated code to build modern web experiences. You can do things quite simply now. And so with that demo, one thing to mention is like the look and feel might not be the look and feel that you want, but it's just HTML and CSS, so you can do whatever, you can make it look however you want. So, all right. So what's simplicity worth? Like, what does it mean for an organization or a team to build something simply? In Python land, we always say simple is better than complex, but that's not just because we're weird, it's because it makes life easier for everyone. So I mentioned the stack a bit earlier. So I built a thing in the stack and it was working great. The project worked great. I could be productive, but it was a little bit tedious switching between the different applications. Like it wasn't super nice for me. And it wasn't super nice for the team I was working with either. There were certain people on the team, like junior team members, who really, really struggled to be productive. And like as an educator of junior developers, I was just like, how much more do we need to do to get people to enter this entry-level position? Like how much more do they need to know? Is there some other gateway like dev position that they could do instead of web development? Or is like something needs to change, something's got to give? And then I changed things out, and what I did was I rebuilt a whole lot of the front-end stuff in HTMX while leaving the old stuff in place, and ended up with just a backend built in Django, and the Django rendered some HTML files like old school, and that worked great. It was so much simpler. And what was cool is that everyone was productive. Like I was way more productive because I didn't need to context switch so much, and I didn't need to think about like, okay, then it goes there and it updates the Redux state and the Saga. I was just like, cool, put the HTML over there, and it worked. And that was great. So all of the team members added more value. So same team, way more value, like not just slightly more, like a lot more. And the code base itself was so much smaller and so much simpler with so many fewer moving parts that there weren't as many weird bugs. Like there's not as much like rewriting and like odd tests that you forgot to write and edge cases and things like that. So that was pretty cool. And everyone was much closer to being a full stack developer. Now they just needed to learn one thing and then they could do the work. So there is still space for specialization. There are still people who should be more focused on different aspects of the code base, but like if I wanted to get one person to like make a button that like fetched some data and drew a thing, they'd be able to do it. So that was really cool. So this is a throwback to an earlier slide. Organizations that do web dev have a front-end team and a back-end team, and then there's the teamwork complexities, project management load, extra handoffs. It's a lot. And we could get rid of some of that. So I don't know how many of you, well, Conway's Law is great. I really like it. People have heard of it in different ways, but basically if you have an organization structure that is structured in a specific way, then the thing that you produce tends to also be structured in that way. So if you can remove some of the constraints that you have on the structure of your team, then that's good. Like that means that you have more freedom of like team structure and product structure. So all in all, it's fantastic, but wait, there's more. So this is starting to sound like an infomercial because like this is the part that really got me. So thinking about technical education and the difficulty junior developers have in getting into their first job, like lowering that barrier to entry is just good for the ecosystem in general. So web developers can get work. And for organizations, there's a larger, cheaper talent pool that they can tap into. And because they can more reliably get like productivity out of junior people, it makes hiring junior people less risky. It's like you can hire a person and they're like more likely to be productive, assuming that you use simple tools. So juniors get an opportunity to grow. Like everybody wants to hire mid or senior level developers at the moment, but nobody wants to hire juniors. And like there's this gap. So yeah, so tools like HTMX are freaking fantastic. So it's good for the devs, it's good for the teams, it's good for the organizations, and it's good for the ecosystem. So yeah, I really love HTMX like quite a lot, and I want to spread the good word of HTMX because I think, like, I genuinely think it's going to help a lot of people in a lot of ways. I mean, imagine if organizations could use junior devs better, just all organizations. How freaking cool is that? There are other tools like HTMX as well. This is a trend to there is a trend to like simplify the web, but yeah, this is quite a trailblazer. Yeah, so I'm going to shamelessly plug something that I'm working on. So I run training in HTMX and other things. I run a bunch of workshops and customized training solutions. So I've been working in tech ed for like 5 years and learned a lot along the way. So the stuff that I'm doing, it's not like edutainment. There's a lot of education stuff that happens that's not that effective. The stuff that I'm doing is crafted with everything that I've learned over the last half a decade plus. So I have small groups, high support. I make sure that the support is expert. So that means the people teaching actually have the skills, have demonstrated the skills in real life, and know how to teach, because you can't just like take someone and be like, you're a teacher now, Harry. It doesn't really work. The stuff is also very, very practical, very hands-on, and very personal. So I've run a couple of these things where people have built some really interesting projects. Some people build out like stuff that they want for work, and some people build out stuff that they want for their portfolio projects, all over the place. And again, lovingly crafted. So poured a lot into making sure that these are very high quality learning situations. So yeah, if you are interested, I am running the last workshop of the year on the weekend of the 23rd and the 24th. And as I mentioned, they're pretty small, so there's only a couple of spots left. I think there's like 5 spots left or something like that. And the star of the show is HTMX. It teaches some other stuff as well. So Django, the framework for perfectionists with deadlines. I think a lot of people see this, and if they're not into Django, they're like, I don't want it. But you need a backend if you're using HTMX. And I also think like Django is freaking cool. So it really does speed you up. Tailwind, stuff needs to look good. Playwright, you got to test your things. And Alpine.js. So HTMX is lovely, but it does have some gaps that Alpine fills really nicely. So this stack of tools is like very, very good to be productive in. So that's the next workshop. There will be more next year. So if this doesn't work out, if you're like super keen but you can't make it, that's okay. There will be more. And I also do more custom things for organizations and teams. So I've been talking to a lot of people in South Africa and in different places, so that's been good. But I've noticed that organizations in South Africa haven't really picked up on this stuff yet, which is weird to me. So yeah, it would be nice if they did, because it would be good for the job market and all the people, and good for their teams and whatnot. So yeah, if you want to ramp up on the tools quickly, then hit me up. I would love to help. And I could also craft things for different organizations' use cases. So yeah, that is that. So here's a QR code. I'm just going to show you where it goes real quick. So it goes to slide 1, which has some links. So if you are interested in that workshop, there's that. If you want to ask me questions about workshops in general, then there's that. If you want to talk to me because you're thinking about what this can do for your team, then talk to me. And then there's like, you can read my blog if you want, and there's like some social stuff, but those 3 things are cool. So here is the QR code, but I'll share the stuff with you as well. Yeah, that is the end of my very opinionated TED Talk. Thank you.